Delighted to be joined by Brian Hughes. Brian, thanks for taking the time out to join myself and Fran on our customary Friday night Zoom call. And firstly, many congratulations on being the first Northern-based jump jockey to be champion jockey since John Joe O'Neill back 40 years ago. That must give you some serious sense of pride and achievement.
Yeah, it's great to join you, Kevin. Look, it's a pleasure, really. Look, it was brilliant. Obviously, it's not something everyone dreams of being champion jockey at some point of their career, but it's you don't want to let yourself believe that it's quite possible, because the disappointment of not getting there is probably greater. But yeah, look, it was big sense of achievement. Or I'm proud now looking back when you have the trophy and you look at the legendary names that have won it. Like, not for a second now do I think I'm a legend in any sense of the word, but the people who've won it all down the years, it's something I'm proud of anyways.
And Brian, to be based up the north of England as well, and obviously when John Joe was champion jockey back in the 80s, the north of England was a real powerhouse of jump racing, the likes of Gordon Richards, Arthur Stevenson, Jimmy Fitzgerald, so on and so forth. But the emphasis is really turned around now, hasn't it? And obviously it's more predominantly flat up the north now.
Yeah, you're right. Even since I've come over here 15 years ago, Kevin, the north, as you said, years ago there was the powerhouse of the north, the East to Bees and the likes, and but even since I've come over, there's no more Howard Johnson, no Ferdy Murphy, Len Lunglow. You know what I mean? There's a lot of big yards that aren't there anymore, and it seems to be predominantly southern based now. So, but there's still plenty of trainers, and they're just smaller yards. But I'm very lucky that I've the pick of quite a lot of them.
And obviously, predominantly your stable jockey, Donald McCain, and of course Nicky Richards as well. And you ride for such a wide variety of small, medium-sized and bigger type trainers as well up the north.
Yeah, as you say, obviously I ride, mainly for Donald and Nicky, and there's still like Brian Ellison and James Ewart, and there's plenty of people that support me, as you say, varying different sizes of yards. And I'm lucky enough that I do get the pick of and if a good spare comes up, normally my name's normally in the hat, so I'm quite fortunate in that respect.
And Brian, do you think jump racing is starting to get going again up the north of England?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, look, as you said, it's predominantly flat. There's a big flat contingent up around the north of England and Malton and Midland. But yeah, I do think that there is starting to slowly, yards are starting to increase again. And obviously, look, at the minute, lockdown's not exactly a help to any of the trainers or the owners or anything, but I suppose you have to be optimistic, and you hope that it's sort of gaining a bit of ground again.
And did you ever think you could be champion jockey? I know you're a very driven individual, but did you ever think you could be champion jockey based primarily and solely up the north of England?
Honestly, probably not, Kevin. Obviously you always hope and you dream that that's the case, but the 3 or 4 years before, I was doing as well as I could, and I was a long way off the mark, and I'd always get sort of left behind a bit sort of through the summer, and then I'd make late gains, and obviously I was sort of consistently riding 140 plus winners, but the last season, obviously I was able to keep tabs on the leaders over during the summer, and then obviously myself and Dickie were neck and neck for a while until he got injured. But look, it's obviously, I was obviously heading for, if I stayed in one piece, my best season numbers wise. But yeah, look, it's not something you dream, as you said, to be champion jockey, but I was struggling to let myself believe it, because I didn't want to get disappointment of it either.
And Brian, from as soon as the season got underway last year, in the just at the end of spring and the beginning of summer, May, June time, you just got on a roll, and it was continuous. Had you ridden 100 winners by last Christmas? For your second consecutive Christmas, you'd hit the 100 target.
Yeah, well, that's obviously always the target every year, is to get to the 100 mark. But the last 2 seasons, and mainly last season, I had a good steady flow of winners throughout. And you know yourself, Kevin, when you're riding winners, they just seem to come because you're more and more fashionable, and you seem to get on the better types of horses, and confidence is high in that. But yeah, look, it was that's where I sort of felt I'd gained a bit. I'd been able to ride a good steady flow of winners throughout the whole season.
And Brian, obviously momentum started to gather. The media really got behind it as well. It was brilliant to watch, and it was a great story all the way through. You obviously built up a good lead over Dickie Johnson. He was closing in you, but I still think am I right saying you were still 20 in front of him or near enough to when Dickie obviously fractured his arm in the early part of this year?
Yeah, well, obviously, yeah, we were, as you said, the momentum was building. And I mean, I always kept it at the back of my mind till we got into the new year. And then obviously, myself and Dickie, the first couple of weeks of January, obviously, we'd be riding at the similar meetings. And I just took the lead, I think. And then he got the injury. And then I was obviously rolling away, and I think I managed to ride 20 winners before he got back. But then obviously we missed a couple of weeks with bad weather and one thing and another. And obviously he the first couple of weeks he was back, he was making inroads. But I just had to keep my head down and just had to ride the same amount of winners as him. And then it was physically impossible for him to inroad, get into the gap really. But anyway, we managed to do it. And I'd say both of us still had plenty of ammunition for the rest of the season, the last 6 weeks rather, when obviously racing was stopped.
And obviously then you had the big meetings like Dickie, but obviously you had Ayr coming up, the Scottish Grand National meeting. You had obviously Aintree as well. You've ridden plenty of winners at Aintree, the Grand National meeting. There was plenty of big meetings coming up in the north of England. Yeah,
well, that's what I say. Like obviously Donald and Nicky were gearing up for Aintree and Ayr, because that's obviously where they obviously aim their better horses, and we had plenty of nice horses that we thought would be good and competitive at both meetings. So obviously it was frustrating when it didn't happen, but we had still, like both my biggest yards had still plenty of firepower to they were waiting on the better ground, and and obviously in a festival at Perth and places like that. So there was going to be a good end to the season anyways.
And Brian, coming to say the end of February, start of March, did you then start to realise, well, I have a massive chance of being crowned champion jockey? Did it bring added pressure to you? Did you start to feel it basically?
Obviously, yeah, it started to dawn on you that that it could actually be possible. But being truthful, Kevin, obviously, like I've going back even 20 years ago, I've always had good people around me and take good advice from them. And I mean, I could only control what I was doing, and my agent just said, just keep doing what you've been doing, and you can only control what you do. And that's all I did. And look, obviously, you try not to look over your shoulder or watch what Richard Johnson was doing, because I just had to worry about myself and just keep doing the things I was doing like I had been all season. And as I say, then obviously you just need to look to stay in one piece.
Surely though, Brian, if you had a blank day, you're looking at the phone on the way home, how many winners did Dickie Johnson ride? You wouldn't be human if you didn't do that.
Oh, absolutely, Kevin. And that's just the nature of this game. You're looking and seeing what the other fella's done and one thing and another. But, you just got to keep your head down. And that's probably, as you will know, most jockeys, it's all on the mental side of things. You've got to just, like, when things aren't going well, you've just got to keep doing the same thing and not try too hard, and just keep riding horses as you would have in normal circumstances. And you hope that it if say you have a couple of bad days or 2 days, that you hope it turns around quite quickly.
And Fran, obviously you can relate exactly to what Brian went through, because you would have been champion jockey back in Ireland. You were well clear when you had that horrific injury. What was it? There was only 7 or 8 of you in a mile maiden in the Curragh. The last place you'd expect something like that to happen in such a small field, and both yourself and Mick Canaan both suffered injuries, and that put paid to your championship season.
Yeah, indeed, Kevin. And that's the thing, isn't it? You're clear and then you're hoping you don't get injured, but you're always looking behind you, aren't you? That's the thing I found. You're constantly looking, what's he riding, what's he doing? I used to take on you and Pat, Pat Smullen and yourself and my agent Kieran O'Toole, and you're trying to outthink each other, and it can really get quite intense, Brian, can't it? And you just got to block out all of that stuff once you get on the track, though, I found. Anyway, once you're on the horse, you just got to make the most of each ride then from then on. But it's an intense time, and it kind of takes over everything.
Oh, absolutely, Fran. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's you just live and breathe it. But as you say, I mean, you've got to put all that stuff behind you when you get on the horse, and because I mean, the horse doesn't know you're fighting for a championship, and you know yourself. If you're trying to make things, force things in a race, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the wrong thing. And if you're not going out into a race with a cool head, and you know you'll make the wrong call, or you won't sit when you should be sitting, or you'll be asking the horse for his effort too soon. And as you say, yeah, look, it obviously comes with more experience you get, but you obviously look over your shoulder, but you try and keep doing the same things you've always done when you get on the horse's back.
Indeed. And Brian, obviously things are going great. COVID intervened, end of Cheltenham week. Was it a state of limbo that am I champion, or are we going to be back racing, or how did you deal with that shutdown? I suppose like anybody else at the time, it's strange.
It was very strange. Like, I mean, obviously, one day we were racing, and then was going to Weatherby, and we got a call, oh, this is the last day's racing. Season's finished. And I'm thinking, well, surely, you know, you're thinking, then there was a rumour, oh, the season might be void and all this sort of thing. And then you're thinking, that would be about typical, wouldn't it? You know, but, look, it's just, it was annoying from my point of view that the season was stopped, and everyone, other jockeys and trainers and owners and when horses were there to run. But I suppose then, obviously, the reality had to set in, and you're looking at the news, and there's a lot of people losing their lives. And then, you know, you've got to think, well, probably fortunate enough and luckily enough, no one that I know that got COVID, or you know, actually died from COVID. So it's I suppose you got to be thankful for that as well.
Indeed. And Brian, just obviously when it was confirmed, we seen you getting presented with a trophy at home and everything. It must be, I know it wasn't a walkout at Sandown that you're hoping for the last day of the season, but still to get that trophy into your hands must have been something else.
Oh, it was brilliant. I mean, like, that's probably when the first moment you hit it, and you're looking at the names that people have won it over the last however many years, and you think, wow, my name's on there too, you know. And it's just, you don't obviously believe you're as good as them other jockeys, but you're thinking, well, if I don't achieve anything else, it's there, and it can't be taken off. But yeah, look, obviously didn't get the Sandown day, but as Kevin will probably agree with me, I wouldn't be one for the big smoke. The quieter day I got at home would probably suited me fine now.
And Brian, obviously the season, you've 74 or 5 winners ridden up until we've done this. After the state of play on Tuesday, Harry Cobden had 3 today. Sorry for reminding you about that, but you drew a blanket hat-trick. You're still 7 in front, and 74 winners. You're a little bit behind last season, but it's a different time. And obviously, jump racing was started 2 months later than it normally does in England. Yeah,
look, obviously this season is a different setup. Obviously, as you say, jump racing started 2 months later. The last 2 seasons I've ridden 100 winners before Christmas. And yeah, you see Harry Cobden, he's a lot closer than he would be in a normal year. But again, look, that's just the way it is. I mean, it's a different time for everybody. You know, the way we've all had to adapt, and like, even when the racing did get going, I mean, there wasn't very many northern meetings. There was 7 meetings in the first 2 months. It was predominantly southern based and Midlands based. So look, that's just the way it was. And I've still been able to get my head in front and just keep chipping away at it. And obviously Harry Cobden, Harry Skelton, there's Dickie, there's Sam Twiston. You know, there's lads there that, you know, you could throw a blanket over 5 or 6 lads there. But look, it is what it is. And this is it. I've still got plenty of horses to ride, and as they will. So I mean, we'll get into the new year, and hopefully we can keep our head down, and we try our best to keep our head in front. Brian, you won a couple of smart-looking young horses for Nicky Richards, both in the colours of Trevor Hemmings at Ayr on Monday, Wetlands and Maroon. They look like 2 horses with a big future out of them. Yeah, we hope to do, Kevin. Yeah, obviously they're obviously Wetlands is a fine chasing stamp of a horse. Obviously, he's won his bumper, and then he won well yesterday. And we hope he's still progressive. He acts on soft ground. We think he'll get a bit further too. So yeah, look, he's a horse with his whole future in front of him. And you hope like something like him, he might, make into a nice day and chaser one day, and you obviously dream that he'll be quite smart. And obviously Marone, I mean, he doesn't know how to run a bad race, that horse. I mean, he's had 5 runs and he's won 4 of them. So, but again, he's a big son of Milan, big fine horse. He's won all his races on heavy ground, and we actually think he wants decent ground. So, hopefully, again, he was one that missed his novice hurdle target last year in the spring on a bit better ground. But hopefully now that he's adapted well to fences, there might be a nice novice chasing him come the springtime.
Good stuff. And Clondaw Caitlin, she's another filly. You won a grade. Did you win a grade 2 or grade 3 in her last season? She ran well in her first start over fences, and of course it was Cheltenham as well that she ran in. Yeah,
Clondaw Caitlin, very well bought by Bobby O'Ryan. Yeah, she wasn't very expensive last year now, and she won her bumper and she won 3 novice hurdles, obviously, and the last one was the grade 2 premier hurdle, but she's a tough filly, and she kept improving with every run, and as you say, the plan was go chasing this year, and she's had a start over fences and ran really well in Cheltenham at the start of I think it was the first meeting at Cheltenham actually. So yeah, look, she's a nice filly that we hope that we can get a bit of graded form or black type over fences with her, and yeah, she's hopefully one that we got to look forward to for the rest of the year.
I'm waiting patiently, Brian. The plan is to see him back in the King George. The last time we saw him in action, he was only beaten a length by Defi Desai in last year's Tingle Creek.
Yeah, look, he ran well last year. Last time we saw him, yeah, as you say, behind Defi Desai and Undersco, obviously 2 decent horses, and there was no fluke about that. And you'd have to say that he a bit further, and he would have got even closer to them 2 horses. But yeah, the plan is to go have another go at the King George. I schooled him on Monday, and he felt great. And fingers crossed. I mean, he's been a horse that we haven't seen a lot of him. He's been a little bit fragile, and hopefully, say we get to the King George in one piece. And obviously, look, it's a good race. And funnily enough, that's where everything started to unravel for him 2 years ago when he got brought down in the King George. It's sort of it's been a long road to get him back, but hopefully, like, it's a good race. But hopefully, he'll run it. He'll run well, because I think we do still think a lot of him. And although he's getting on in years, he hasn't got a lot of miles on the clock either. And
Brian, obviously, you were fancying him. He was one of the favourites. Was your second or third favourite? Maybe I stand to be corrected for that. In the year that Clondaw won the King George, I think you got brought down at the 9th that day. I know it's very hard to say, but riding him on his homework and that, do you feel he's still as good as he was 2 years ago?
Yeah, I genuinely think he is. Like, I mean, it didn't surprise me at all last year that he ran so well. Because he's probably northern trained, or he hasn't seen a lot of him. Unfortunately, people are very quick to write off a horse, but he still feels the same horse he is. He has that many miles on the clock, as I said, and we still think his homework still is good, and he still gives you a good feel at home when you're schooling him and that. So, look, obviously, when you've only got one of them, Kevin, you're really hoping that he is good as other ones, and he'll be very competitive, because there's a good horse are few and far between,
Yeah, it'll be great to see him back. Fran?
Yeah, Brian, hopefully things go well on, obviously, the King George, but just want to go back to the start. First time I got to know you, you're an apprentice with Kevin Prendergast before you went over to England, and prior to that you were with Jimmy Lamb. Can you just tell us how you got into the game and got started? Obviously, you're born up in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, well, obviously, between the common denominator of most young lads getting into racing in school was never very interesting for them. And I was no different. And the careers teacher got me a brochure on race, the apprentice school in the Curragh, and once I knew that existed, that was the path I was going. Obviously, I was interested in racing and wanted to be a jockey, but then you just didn't know how to go about it. And yeah, I went to race, and that was good. Learned plenty there, but then I suppose I got properly educated then when I got sent to Kevin Prendergast, because I mean, like good old fashioned yard with good values, old fashioned values, and you know, I didn't probably appreciate it at the time, but when you stand back, you realize how good a trainer Kevin actually still is, you know. But yeah, it started off in the Curragh, and then and I've been lucky. Then I was always had the right people around me, Fran, you know, just to help you in good jockeys were there, and you learned plenty from them, you know.
What was one of the key things you learned? Sorry, Fran.
No, go on, Kev. Go on.
What was one of the key attributes to Kevin Prendergast? Why is he such a good trainer, both of horses and of jockeys, right?
I suppose he probably instills a good work ethic in the young lads, and I mean, he said to me very early on, you know, you get out of this game what you put into it, and like apprentices were like apprentices, as in you worked hard, but he was very fair. I mean, I wasn't the best apprentice he had that at the time we were there. There was some good lads, and but like when they all put their head down and worked, they got their rewards. I mean, obviously myself and Chris Gagan, we signed on the same day, and I mean, Chris was a better apprentice to me. There's no two ways about it. But again, like, we still got our chances the same as any other lads in the yard, when you worked hard. And look, it was hard at the time. I mean, you know, you rode out every day, even on your Sunday off. If you wanted rides, you just had to put your head down and work, and it sets you up then for the rest of your life, because then you know, well, if I work hard, I'll achieve X, Y, you know what I mean? So, but Kevin was different. I mean, like, even like he'd see if you know things weren't going well. Suddenly, like, I broke my arm in my second season, and come back, and I was struggling away, and then he actually took Chris off a filly, Miss Trish, in the Galway Festival, and let me ride her, and I was a 10-pound claimer, and like, it just propelled you back into like people's minds again. You know, like she was a great filly. Like, I mean, I gave her the worst ride you've ever seen. Pat Shanahan probably wanted to kill me after the race, and probably Fran as well. Pat panicking, the young lad, and just got you know, typical Galway, drawn on the inside, and nothing was happening right, and the filly was that good, she got us out of trouble, and you know, like, you think you're a hero, well, everyone else thinks you're a hero, and you look like thinking, I got away with that one. But you know, that was what Kevin did. Like, he would put you on a filly or a horse that, you know, would just throw you back into people's minds, and then I got plenty of rides off the back of that season, you know.
And obviously you learned a lot from Stephen Crane there. Declan McDonough was stable jockey. It was Pádraig Beggy and Mick Hussey. They were there the same time as you as well. There was a real strong team of apprentices there, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, obviously there was Pat Cosgrave and Mick Hussey. They were the older lads. And Damien Murphy, he went to Australia and sadly got killed in a fall out there. But then it was me and Chris. And then Pádraig would have come on the year after me, and then Chris Hayes would have been a couple of years after that. But yeah, I mean, they say like there was good apprentices and lads who went on and had good careers, you know.
And obviously great rivalry in the yard as well, which brought each and every one of you on because you were such good riders. You knew Kevin would give you a chance. He was a great man to claim off horses, so it improved your riding and riding work altogether as well.
Well, that was the thing, Kevin. Like, when you're like you're riding work with all the lads, and Declan's a brilliant jockey, and like you're looking at them riding work, and like, you know, you had to be sharp. Like, I mean, if you got left behind on a piece of work, you know, you were getting it at the top from the boss or Stephen Crane. Like, you know, there was no quarter given. Like, you had to be sharp, and like I remember getting left on the old Vic at the 7 pole, and you're coming up 10 lengths behind everyone else, and you're thinking, when I pull up, I'm getting it here. You know what I mean? But like that sort of thing, like even the lads who didn't have licenses worked in the yard. I mean, you know, you had to be sharp, and you soon had to switch on, and you know, because like you were just afraid of what might happen. You know, at the top of the gallop, you were going to get a few barks at the top. But look, that was it. I mean, it was good riders, and if you went round with your eyes open, even, and your mouth shut, you learned. You know.
And Brian, on the back of that good winner in Galway, obviously things picked up a bit. Your weight was quite good. Probably your best flat winner, you won the McHenry Cup at Gorham Park, and on an outside ride for trainer Jim Bolger, riding Mrs. Gillow, doing 7 stone 13 pounds.
Yeah, well, that man over beside you there, I think he must have put a spell on Mr. Bolger to let me ride her in the first place, because I was struggling away. And I remember Kevin said it was on a Sunday. Kevin said, you can ride this, but you have to do the weight. And again, that was in my 3rd season as an apprentice, and the weight was just starting to catch me a bit. And 7:13, like there wasn't much food or drink intake for a couple of days, but we managed to get down to do the weight, and luckily enough she won. But obviously, just to get a ride for such a trainer was obviously a privilege. But the fact that she went and won, it was a bonus, you know.
And was it?
Sorry, go on, Kevin.
Go on, Fran, go.
I was just going to say, how daunting was it for a young man? Obviously, you're dealing with Kevin Prendergast every day, so you're used to old school knocks. But dealing with Jim Bolger, how was that for your first ride for him?
Well, yeah, I got specific instructions. I wasn't allowed to ring him that day because I think he was off watching the hurling, and I had to ring him at 1 o'clock on the Monday, not 1 minute past 1 o'clock. But yeah, look, it was daunting because you seen, like, obviously the jockeys that Jim Bolger had through his hands, and the esteem he was held in Irish racing, and just to get a ride for him was brilliant, and then to have a winner, and then I was still terrified ringing him the next day, even though I knew the filly had won.
What did he say to you?
Well, the first question, funny enough, he didn't really want to talk about the filly. He wanted to ask me, did I go to mass, and what did my parents work as? Yeah, he was. I don't think it was an interview, but he was more interested in if I was doing everything right, and I suppose what could a 7 pound claimer tell him about a horse that he's trained for 3 or 4 years? Probably nothing.
It wasn't long after that, Brian, then, when obviously your weight was starting to get the better of you, because obviously doing that light, your weight the next week or two afterwards just ballooned, and that's the time you decided that, right, my career lies over jumps. And how did they come about going to England?
Well, yeah, as you say, doing that lightweight, and you've sweated for that, and I actually had a urine sample to give that day, and I was at the track for 6 hours after, and I think I was about nearly 9 stone the next day. But yeah, the weight was starting to catch me, and obviously your father, Bobby, I obviously used to ride out the yearlings for him on lunchtime during the winter, and funny, the back of that winner, Howard Johnson seen me ride that winner and Mrs. Gillow, and Howard rang your dad up and said, "Oh, well, I've seen a good lad riding at Gorham Park," and he said, "Oh, that lad rode away all Mr. and Mrs. Wiley's yearlings last winter." So then obviously that was the natural step. Then Howard said, "Well, if he ever wants to go jumping, tell him to give me a ring." So I think towards the end of that season, I sort of went to Kevin, and I was struggling with the weight, and Kevin released me from the 3 full seasons in your apprenticeship, and I went over to Howard at the end of September to go jumping. I mean, I had a few rides over hurdles while I was an apprentice, which obviously Kevin Prendergast always knew that I was going to end up over jumps, and he actually got me my conditional license when I was in my 2nd year, and just rode the odd one because he did used to have a few jumpers.
And the initial stage in Howard's, what was it like going from Kevin Prendergast yard in the Curragh to Howard Johnson's up the north of England?
Not going to lie now, Kevin. It was chalk and cheese now, to be honest. I mean, obviously, obviously two different types of trainers. Obviously, Kevin Prendergast was, I could probably still tell you now what to do every day because it's such a good system. And Howard's obviously, it was obviously into a jump yard, and Howard is quirky to say the least. So we did a few things that obviously was an eye opener, but it seemed to work at the time. So,
and obviously it was just the beginning, really. I think the infancy, really, of Howard's dominance up the north of England. Obviously, Graham and Andrea Wiley, the investment they put into the yard as well. You had a lot of top class horses there. English Dreamer, Tidal Bay, who you latterly, in a couple of years later, won definitely once, if not twice. But it was now becoming the big powerhouse that it was up the north.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, the year after I'd started, they had the three winners at Cheltenham. Obviously, it was English Dreamer, Arcalis, and No Refuge had won all at the festival. And I mean, the end of every flat season, the quality of horses that there was coming from the sales was like, horses that were placed in derbies and in an arc, and the quality of these flat horses. I mean, obviously now they're all going out foreign, but you were sitting on horses that were 110, 115, to go jumping. Like, it was just getting it out of one Range Rover into another. That's what they felt like. Graham and Andrea Wiley obviously, did spend plenty of money buying these nice horses, and yeah, it was. I mean, it was an eye opener, because you'd never seen such quality animals, to go jumping.
And Brian, obviously you got things started to get going, but you went through a little bit of a lull, and after a couple of seasons then you decided to leave Howard and go freelancing. But as you went freelancing, you still kept that connection with Howard.
Yeah, well, as I say, when I first went there, obviously, Graham Lee would have been stable jockey, and Graham would have been off down south on a weekend riding the good horses in the big races, and I was lucky enough that I was getting on, horses that were run up north, and lucky enough they were winning for me. And then obviously Graham went to Ferdy's the next season after that, and Paddy Brennan would have come up to be first jockey, and again he was right. He got the bulk of the rides. I got a few rides, but the quality wasn't there, and didn't really take the natural progression to step forward. I rode a lot less winners the next year, and so I thought, well, I had to change something to, I wanted to, obviously I was hungry and I wanted to be riding more winners. So I decided to go freelance, and through Howard's wife, her father, late father, Ray Hawkey, he got me in with plenty of trainers. John Wade, Alan Swinbank, obviously, and then your father got me riding for Richard Fahey, and, good flat horses going jumping, and through them 3 yards, I managed to be champion conditional the next year, and then it just started, the balls just started rolling, and I got, every year you just try to ride more and more winners, and try and get more and more contacts, and it's just sort of rolled away from there, really.
And Brian, one of your key attributes is your work ethic, and obviously that was instilled in you from an early age when you're in Kevin Prendergast as well. But as everybody says, if there was 8 days in the week, Brian Hughes would find somewhere to ride out in the 8th day.
Well, yeah, look, at the end of the day, Kevin, it's been instilled in me since I was an apprentice, and I always said to myself, if I didn't achieve what I wanted to by the time I retired, well, then I could say, well, I didn't do it. I didn't achieve it because I didn't put enough effort in, or I didn't I try to give myself every chance to be successful. So if I didn't achieve it, then I can just say, well, I wasn't playing, it wasn't good enough, But I always had that attitude because, again, from being around the right people when I was younger, they instilled that in you, and then then it's through no one else's fault but your own. If you don't put the work in, you're not going to get it out,
And then obviously when Howard gave up training and that, you started riding for Malcolm Jefferson. Started getting a few rides off Malcolm, and next thing you ended up stable jockey, and you were right with Malcolm up until sadly the end. But Malcolm, he was a great trainer, and he was a real old-fashioned trainer, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was. It was very funny how I actually got riding from. Obviously, obviously, it was Howard's, and I rode for James Ewart for a season, and then I just got a spare ride from Malcolm one day at Weatherby. Danny Cook was meant to ride a horse called Makeda, and he was a bit of a brave jumper, and I think he'd fallen on his first start over fences, and not jumped very well on his second start, and Danny Cook got injured. He was meant to ride him, and then I just seen the colours on my peg, and that was my first ride for Malcolm, really. And he went and won, and then he won a couple, and then slowly just got a few more rides from him. And then the next season, I was basically riding them all. And Malcolm was a great trainer, obviously, a little bit like Kevin Prendergast in the fact that, bought a real lovely stamp of a horse, and, might not be the best pedigree in the world, but a real correct, good moving horse. And, he seemed to just bring them on and get good results. And again, for the few seasons we were together, Malcolm's yard was growing and growing. And when we had success, we had, more people coming and more horses, it was going great. And then sadly, Malcolm got cancer, and then it was unfortunate, and then it was awfully sad when he passed away, because I mean he'd sort of got a team of good horses together, and obviously waiting patient. He was just out of his novice season, and obviously we had high hopes for him, and it was Cloudy Dream, Cyrus Darius, horses that were going and being competitive in the big meetings and graded races, and that's kind of what every yard aspires to have.
Indeed. And Brian, just on going from the flat to the jumps, obviously you've developed quite a distinctive style. You're quite quiet in the saddle. Something like a Timmy Murphy, you can obviously be strong when you need to be and have to be, but is the flat influence still there, do you feel, or is it just something that you adapted as you went?
No, Fran, it's very much still there. I mean, look, I was fortunate that, when I started riding in Ireland, like looking around, I mean, obviously, you had Mick Kinnan, Johnny Murta, Pat Smullen, yourself, Declan McDonough, Kevin Manning, like world-class riders. And if you can't sit and look at what they're doing and how they do it well, and, I couldn't ride like you or Mick Kinnan or, but you've got to look at what the good jockeys do well and try and take bits of them all. And obviously I'm not very tall, and I mean, look, not everyone can ride like AP and be aggressive, but or very active. And then you've got Ruby; he's a different style altogether. And and Barry and David Russell, they're different styles. But you just look at all them, and I mean, the flat influence for me, I always like to get a horse balanced and sit quiet, and I say like. A bit like, Paul Carberry was the master at it, how he would smuggle a horse into a race, and the horse wouldn't even know where it was, where it was in the race, and Paul would, but I mean, you just look at the good riders through the years, and you try and not so much copy them, but try and do what they do well and take little bits from them, and to, sort of just fit it so you can, bring your riding forward too.
Indeed, and I was always interested when you teamed up with Donald McCain. Obviously, you've had a great association the last couple of seasons, but his style of riding horses wouldn't necessarily be your ideal style of riding horse. Would that be fair to say?
That'd be a very fair comment, Fran. Look, obviously Donald's a great trainer, and training Grand National winners, and he is the biggest yard in the north. And look, obviously, I suppose I've had to slightly adapt things. How I obviously different trainers want their horses ridden differently, and obviously Donald has probably had to adapt slightly to my style a bit. But I think we work well together. Obviously, I get what he wants, and he sort of sees how I ride. And I suppose that there's a few times now, if there was one that he thought that probably wouldn't be best suited to me, we'd let one of the other lads have a go, because obviously but that's fine. And look, Donald is got a good team of horses now, and we've got obviously Mr. and Mrs. Leslie have invested a lot of money and got some nice young horses, and a lot of the other owners as well. So yeah, look, it's working well at the minute.
And Brian, obviously during the summer as well, you when the jumping yards quietened down, you ride a lot for your good friend Kevin Ryan as well, and Richard Fahey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as I say, I've obviously through your father, I've been introduced to Richard Fahey and Robin O'Ryan, and then obviously latterly, because Kevin's my closest trainer, I've become very good friends with Kevin, and yeah, look, it's great. Obviously, I have a good. Obviously, with starting out in the flat, I still retain plenty of interest in flat racing, and Kevin spoils me a bit now. He lets me ride the nice horses, the group horses, and I get a feel of a good horse on the flat. You know, it's a little bit different maybe than a jumper, but look, it's just something I've always done, Kevin, and yeah, I've good interest in it, and you know.
And Richard and Kevin, I can't remember which one of them gave you the nickname, but you were to Kevin and Richard, you're basically known as Shiny Shoes. Tell us how that came about.
Yeah, obviously when I started going to ride out in Richards, I again from going back to Kevin Prendergast, I was always told appearance is everything, and when the boots were polished and shiny, that's how Richard said. He still calls me Shiny to this day. Brian Hughes with the shiny shoes. That's all I ever got taught. That's how he would talk at me. Yeah, look, it was great. Obviously, like, I mean, I've been lucky enough to be involved with Richard since I've come over, and I mean, you can see how his yard's evolved and done brilliantly. But a brilliant trainer, but an even nicer human being. Him, Kevin, and Robin. You know.
And Brian, a couple of young horses to look out for that you're looking forward to riding that some of the viewers at home mightn't be necessarily too au fait with, but if you a couple of horses there are probably catching you in the hop now a little bit. I know Fran Berry's writing these down now because he likes to have a bet or two, but is there a couple of horses the viewers to watch out for?
Kev, I'm more interested in what's happening tomorrow than young horses. I can't wait that long.
You haven't got the time, Fran. Well, Kev, you should know now from being my agent for a small length of time that I wouldn't be the best judge in the world, but I mean, horses like Castle Rush in there, he's a real nice horse, and Glen Duff and Nicky's, and Donald's got a couple of real nice horses. We've got a nice juvenile there called Danger Money that's going to come out now and in the next couple of weeks, and obviously horses like Gaelic Coast and Heartbreak Kid, and you know, there's Goobinator. There's a lot of nice young horses coming through, you know. And a horse runs Monday. We think a bit of him present and counting. He hasn't shown what we seen at home yet, but I mean, horses like that, I mean, you just hope that they keep improving, and it'd be nice races to be won with them, you know.
Good stuff. And Brian, there's a lot of young riders coming along as well. Is there anybody up the north of England, one of the younger brigade coming through, one of the claiming riders that's impressed Brian Hughes, and someone for us all to keep an eye on as well that you think will do really well going forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of good young riders coming through, Kevin, as you say. I mean, I suppose the one that would spring to mind most is Danny McMenamin. He's obviously conditional with Nicky Richards. He's from the north of Ireland as well. But yeah, he's been doing a lot of things right. He's riding really well at the minute, and he's riding plenty of winners. Yeah, he's one that's definitely in the last year or so. He's definitely improving and he's going well. But I mean, there's a lot of good claimers coming through.
Good stuff. And Niall Hannity's keeping well. Our colleague from Racing TV seems to run the north of England. Well, so he tells us, Fran, isn't it?
Well, so we'd be lost without him, wouldn't we? Yeah, look, he's Niall's keeping well. Yeah, I see him most days at the meetings in the north when he's on the TV, as you say. But
is he always eating pies and chips and everything?
I couldn't divulge that sort of information now, you know.
Well, he's always telling myself and Fran that he's out cycling with Keith Dalgleish and with the Lycra, and he's out running. We find it very hard to believe because it doesn't look, the evidence isn't quite visual, is it, Fran?
Maybe it's the screen or the camera, but he definitely isn't losing weight anyway.
They say the camera adds 10 pounds, don't they?
Well, definitely in Hannity's case, that is true.
Look,
Fran, anything else you want to ask? Anything else you want to ask? Brian?
Yeah, Kev, we forgot one thing actually. We spoke about Mrs. Gillow, but talked about the circle completing a course in 2005. Yeah. Brian, you got a call to go back and ride for Kevin Prendergast in Labrador Curl in Leopardstown in January. 5 years, it'll be 6 years next January.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's it again. Like, again, you know, I've always got on great with Kevin when I was there since I've left, and he'd ring us or I'd ring him and see how everything's going. But yeah, the ride came up, and thankfully for me, I was the first choice. So we flew back, and obviously, you know, it was just brilliant to ride him a good winner, and so all my family was there, and Kevin Kim himself and Gareth McCann was there, who, you know, who's obviously a friend of mine from way back. But yeah, look, it was just great to get the call to ride the filly, and then, you know, just goes to show when Kevin has the right ammunition, you know, it's very competitive hurdle, as you know. I'm pretty sure you'll have won it at some point when you were riding over jumps.
Once, yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, you need a decent horse. It's quite a competitive. And I was lucky that I got on her, and yeah, she, look, as you say, good horse to take no riding. Kevin had her spot on that day, and yeah, it was just great that you know, I was privileged to get the riding her, and then the fact that she won was all the better, you know.
That must have given you a great kick. Sorry, Fran.
I was just going to say, Kevin, I see he won by 3 lengths. I'd say Kevin wasn't too happy with that now. He's demanded the handicapper himself.
Yeah, that was a bit of a pill to swallow. But to be fair, we never actually seen her much after that. She did get injured, and she was off to the breeding shed. But yeah, and then also I looked over my shoulder, which that was a no as well. So I got told about that when I came in too. Anyway, luckily enough, he forgave me.
Kevin Prendergast never gave out about the handicapper, did he, lads?
Might have wrote him a letter, I think, maybe.
Well, Brian, Fran, anything else to add or anything else?
No, I think it's great catch up, Kev. Yeah, great to see you, Brian. Things going so well, and hopefully, I look forward to seeing your horse down in Kempton now. That'll be very interesting.
Yeah, good to see you, Fran. Yeah, hopefully he runs well, and fingers crossed we get it, you know.
Brian, 3 Cheltenham winners on the board already. Is that something you obviously want to add to? Would that be the next step? You want to ride more Cheltenham winners?
Yeah, it would be, Kevin. Obviously, look, it's a hard place to compete, you know. Everyone wants Cheltenham winners. I've only had 3 of them, as you say. But obviously, to win the grade races down there is obviously what every jockey aspires to. I'd love to be going down there with horses with chances in them. I mean, I've been placed in a few of them, but yeah, sure, that's obviously the dream, and hopefully, you never know, one day you stumble across a horse that's good enough to be winning them races. Yeah,
good stuff. But the main aim, Brian, is to retain that championship crown this season.
Yeah. I mean, the trophy's in the other room there, Kevin. I don't want to let it go just yet, so we'll have to keep our head down, and hopefully we can keep a hold of it anyways.
Great stuff. Well, Brian, many thanks for taking the call, and it's been a good catch up. Best of luck the weekend, best of luck King George, and best of luck for the rest of the season. Hopefully we crown champion jockey for the 2nd year in succession in 2021.
Thanks, lads. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.